Kris Wobbe was and has been the director of the Center for Project-Based Learning, and she was the founding sort of associate dean leading the Great Problem Seminar, as I mentioned before, and also as a co-author of Project Learning in the First Year, published by Stylus. Thank you all. Kris, you're on.
Thank you, Kent. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning to share a little bit about how WPI is working to spread that special sauce that both Lori, Wally, and Kent have referred to. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with a very brief recap of history, which you've already heard a little bit about today. As has been said, our motto for over 150 years has been theory and practice. But some brave administrators and educators on a fateful day in May convinced the faculty to vote to introduce the WPI plan, which really focused our entire curriculum on projects. There were the two major projects that have been referred to already, the IQP and the MQP, that are a quarter of students' academic activities for 2 years of their lives here. And they did that because they really wanted to put that theory and practice into action to make sure students not only had learned the foundational material that they would need in their professional lives, but they had practiced putting it into action on real problems before they left WPI. And so we began this project-based curriculum. And the important thing to note here is those projects were outside of courses, but over time, next slide, Rachel, what we noticed was that the projects actually crept into courses. So this is a very complicated slide, but if you pay attention to the big red arrow focused on that red circle, a study done by the 1-8 Foundation for us several years ago, in that study they surveyed WPI faculty to ask them how many of them were using projects in their courses. 87% of the responding faculty said that they were using projects in one or more of their classes. Now, no faculty are hired and told that they must bring projects into their courses. So the movement of these projects into courses suggests that the WPI faculty recognize the power of those projects. And in fact, since the institution of our project-based curriculum, we've been hearing stories from students about how transformational the project learning has been for them. And of course, that was the intent of the people who voted in the plan, to have this really more impactful education. But we didn't, aside from that anecdotal evidence, have any really strong evidence that the projects were doing what we had hoped they would do until about a decade ago. There was some concern that maybe we ought to get that evidence, that we should have plenty of evidence to find if we actually looked for it. And so next slide, Rachel. We instituted a longitudinal study of all of the alumni who had graduated since the beginning of the plan. And that survey demonstrated that, in fact, the projects did have the impact that we had hoped in helping our students be better prepared for their professional lives. The alumni were asked the extent to which their projects, the IQP and the MQP, contributed to success in their professional lives. And you can see in that bottom right-hand circle, 80% of them reported that the projects had a positive impact on their success in business or industry. And largely that is probably because they felt that the projects helped them function better in teams, helped them solve problems, as you can see in some of those other circles. What was entirely unanticipated was that many of the alumni also reported that the projects that they undertook had a big impact on developing their personal character. And further, the students who had participated in one of these projects at a project center, who had that immersive one-term experience, reported stronger positive impacts than the students who had not had that opportunity. And when we saw that data, that sort of laid on WPI an obligation that the administration recognized, and that obligation, that sense of obligation, led to two things. Next slide. The first was, as Kent reported, the launch of the idea that we wanted all of our students to have that opportunity to participate in working with a project center on some real world problem of real significance. And so we now have are sending 1,000 students. We're not sending 1,000 students, but 1,000 students are working with project sponsors all over the world on real significant problems. The second piece of that obligation was knowing, even though that our students are really well prepared to deal with these global grand challenges in their professional lives, the world's got a whole lot more problems than our 1,000, 1,200 students a year can effectively solve. So we felt that maybe we needed to help other institutions prepare their students also to be as prepared as our students are to handle global grand challenges. And so next slide. In 2015, we launched our first Summer Institute on Project-Based Learning. And this was built without really knowing how many institutions would be even interested in coming to such a thing. But the Institute was designed for different colleges and universities to send teams of 5 educators, be they administrators, faculty, educational staff, to come to WPI, and using the resources that we have with all that expertise in advising and bringing projects inside of our classes to help those institutions work on their own plans to advance project-based learning on their campuses. So we built the Institute not knowing what sort of response there would be. We were quite pleasantly surprised and a little overwhelmed at the response that we had. And that first Institute in the summer of 2015 ran with great success. And that led to, next slide, a recognition that maybe we needed a center for project-based learning. And here I'd like to throw some props to Professor Rick Vaz. Rick was the instigator of that alumni study that led to the creation of all the evidence of the impact of the project-based learning curriculum. Rick was the person who decided maybe we should try that Summer Institute idea. And so we were delighted when Rick became the inaugural director of the Center for Project-Based Learning. And that center now is responsible for delivering that Summer Institute on Project-Based Learning with, of course, support from all across campus as those faculty who've had so much good experience are lending their expertise to serve both as coaches and as workshop facilitators. But in addition to that Summer Institute, the center also does custom workshops. Next slide, where we send WPI faculty and staff to other campuses. And you see here on the left a picture of a workshop being delivered at Vellore Institute of Technology in Vellore, India. And the picture on the right is a workshop delivered at TechSup, a technological university in Lima, Peru. And these allow us to provide that sort of training in delivering project-based education to larger groups of faculty on their campuses. Next slide. So there is an appetite, and over the past, well, as of September of 2019, we had worked with over 139 institutions in 16 different countries. The institutions that have brought us to their campuses or who have worked at our Summer Institute are of all sizes and all types, from community colleges to small private universities enrolling 500 students total, to giant institutions that have over 25,000 students. And so we're very pleased that many of them have asked us to come back. So we're helping to spread that revolution in higher education, to deliver that secret sauce to other places. And then when COVID hit, next slide, we realized that we could continue that work. And unlike the more intimate settings that you saw in the prior slides, our workshops now look more like this. But that ability to deliver these online led us to the realization, next, that this broadens our reach. Institutions that might not have been able to afford to have us come to them or to send a team to us, now we can deliver some training on how to do project-based learning remotely and to institutions and faculty far and wide. And I'm happy to turn the podium, so to speak, over to Joe Doran, who's going to give another example of how we're spreading the expertise of WPI to educators at a distance. Thank you.